So this week's parsha is a double portion of Behar and Bechukosai. Behar and Bechukosai, and we'll start by talking about the words Har Sinai. Because Behar talks about the concept of the major mitzvah in Behar is about the sabbatical year, the mitzvah of the sabbatical year, Shemitah, and the Jubilee year. And actually, this is something, now that I mention it, this is something Michael Adin was obviously something that he was a very big part of his life. And that is freedom. If you will see, we have joining us on the Zoom today, our friend Lincoln. And I want to read to you what Lincoln posted on Twitter. Lincoln's joining us on the Zoom. I'll read to you what he wrote about Michael on Twitter. This is something that's extremely powerful. Let me read it to you. Hold on. He wrote the following. He said the following. Hold on. He said, in 2008, after surviving a decade of imprisonment and torture in the Islamic Republic in Iran, I managed to escape to Iraq. It was Michael intervened. He engaged directly with the U.S. government, secured my entry into the United States as a political refugee. He didn't just open the door, he paid for my flight out of his own pocket to ensure I reached safety. And then he goes on to say that Michael taught him all about how to integrate into society. This is the concept of freedom, of something that Michael very, very much cherished and helped people attain. So let me do that verse, which is about freedom. In this week's parsha, it says that in the Jubilee year, or chapter 25, verse 9, and Jeff remembers this when we went to Cuba. Jeff Burt remembers when we went to Cuba maybe 20 years ago. I don't know, remember the year. I got off the plane in Cuba and I went to, we stopped in front of the Cuban parliament and I blasted the chauffeur. That was something. And I recited this verse. It says in chapter 25, verse 9, V'avarta shofar trua b'chodesh hashvi'i, be'etzor ha'chodesh b'yom ha'kippurim taviru shofar b'chol artzachem. That you shall blast the shofar, a blast of shofar in the 7th month, and the 10th day of the month, on Yom Kippur, you shall blast the shofar in all of your lands. And then the verse states, V'kidashtem et shnat ha'chamishim shana, and you shall sanctify the 50th year, ukaratem deror ba'aretz. You shall declare freedom in the land. For all those who dwell there. Yovelhi, it shall be a jubilee. It shall be a jubilee for you. V'shavtem isha chuzato, v'isha mishparto tashuvo. Each person will return to his ancestral homeland and to his family. So these are the verses about the Jubilee year. Let me first read what Rashi says, and then after we read what Rashi says, we're going to read what the Talmud says about this. And after we read what the Talmud says, we'll see some of the Hasidic explanations. But first, I want to read what the commentary of Rashi on about the freedom in the land and the Jubilee year. So it's chapter 25, verse 9. Says the pasuk says, Vavarta lashon vayaviru kol b'machane. You shall proclaim. It's an obligation to proclaim freedom in the land. What are you showing me? Is that a picture of me, Jeff? Is that me blasting it? I can't see what you're showing. Jeff, I can't hear you. Hold on, Jeff. Talk to us, Jeff.
I want to show. This is the picture of you blowing the shofar, but it's at the bottom of that it's a monument in the center of Cuba. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, can you bring that in today, Jeff? Can you bring that in?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to.
I want to show it to my children. I think they'll like it.
Okay, I'll bring the picture itself. Okay, thank you.
You bring the actual picture?
I should be able to find it. I'll let you know.
Wow, that's
Okay.
incredible, Jeff.
Okay.
I can't wait to see that.
Okay.
And do you get, Jeff, they put that on the front page of the Jerusalem Post newspaper. Do you have a copy of that also?
No, I didn't. I don't have that. Let me see if I have it. Continue.
Because Michael Dean sent it to Sue Singer, and then Sue's son was the editor of the newspaper, and he put it on the front page of the newspaper. Yeah, anyway, that was like 20 years ago, believe it or not, when I was young and reckless. Anyway, it says you shall proclaim in the camp B'Yom Kippurim on Yom Kippur. So we're going to skip that Rashi. V'kidashtem, and you shall consecrate at its outset in the court, and you say this year is sanctified. Now, what does it mean? You shall declare freedom in the land. Rashi says, La'avadim bein nirtza bein shalokolu sheishanim mishinim kar. This refers to the Hebrew slaves. That what does it mean? It refers to the Hebrew slaves that there's two types of Hebrew slaves. There's a Hebrew slave who's supposed to serve for 6 years, and then there's a Hebrew slave, who says, I'm going to serve for longer than 6 years because he has his ear pierced. He doesn't want to go freedom. He doesn't want to go free. Both of those slaves go free at this time with the Jubilee year. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'u Lashon Deror. What is meant by the term Deror? What is meant by the term Deror, freedom? Kemedayer be daire v'chuhu, as one who dwells in a dwelling place, etc. So it comes from the Gemara Rosh Hashanah 9b, as one who dwells in a dwelling place and carries on a trade throughout the province. One who dwells in a dwelling place and carries on a trade throughout the province. That's considered to be free. Karatem deror b'kol yoshvel. You shall declare freedom in the land. Shadar b'kol makom shel rotzev ve'enu b'reshut acherim. He lives wherever he pleases, and is not under the authority of others. So this is the idea that that's what one declares in the Jubilee year. What does the word Yovel mean? Shana zu muvdelet mishar shanim. This year is distinct from other years. It's distinct from other years. How so? B'nikivat shem l'avada, through the giving of a name to it alone. Umashma, what's its name? Yovel. Its name is the Yovel al shem tekiyat shofar, through the blasting of the shofar. What does the word Yovel mean? The word Yovel means it means a ram's horn. It's Rashi to Exodus 19:3 says it's related to the Arabic word for ram, which is yubla. Yubla. So Rashi says Yovel means a ram's horn, whereas Ibn Ezra says Yovel means to be sent out, and Ramban understands it to mean freedom of movement. So Rashi says that the name comes from the blasting of the horn. The other commentaries say it comes from the release of the slaves. And then it says, V'shavtem isha chuzachto v'isha mishpachto tashuvu. Each one shall return to his ancestral land, that the fields return to their owners, and the slaves go back to their own homes, that they're also free at this time. Hold on one second. You found it, Jeff?
I found it, and that's my son Andrew, and you, I believe, are in the distance. I have a magnifying glass. I'll bring it with me. But that's the site, and there's a bunch of other people around. But that's the site, and I see little teeny people right here. I think you may be one of them. I'll bring it in.
No, those are the soldiers. The soldiers were standing there with their guns while I blew the shofar.
Yeah, but they didn't let you. You wanted to go to the top, and they didn't want to let you up there.
Yeah, they didn't let me to the top. They just let me. Yeah. They let me to the bottom.
I'll bring it tonight.
Oh, so you have the picture of me blowing the shofar.
Well, if I have a magnifying glass, this is all the picture I have, and I think that's you. And okay. A little teeny thing. We'll check it out when I get there. Sorry to interrupt you.
All right. God willing, we'll see it.
Okay.
I'm looking forward. So thank you, Jeffrey. You save everything.
Well, these are important things. Yeah, we were afraid we were going to get arrested because they weren't.
Not me. I wasn't afraid. I was not afraid. Okay. So now let me just see what the Gemara, let me quote for you the Gemara on these verses. And on you shall blast the shofar in your land, and you shall declare freedom in the land. It is a Jubilee year. So let me just cite for everybody the Talmudic text. So the Talmud in Rosh Hashanah 27b says that it has to be, the shofar cannot be turned over when you blast it. It has to be turned facing up. It has to be turned facing up, derech havaraso, in the normal manner. And if you turn it upside down, you have not fulfilled the commandment here. Meaning to say, you need to blow it in the proper way. The same way the ram has it on its head while he's living. What's the reason why this is significant? I'm not really sure why it's so significant, other than to tell us that it needs to look like a ram's horn. And so therefore it's reminding us of the ram's horn. That's Rashi's approach. What's the reason why we need to be reminded of the ram's horn? Maybe to remind ourselves of the ram of Isaac, or that Abraham offered the ram instead of Isaac. I'm not exactly sure. Then we have the next Gemara. It says that it states in Rosh Hashanah, it says here of Avarta Shofar, and it says in Parashas Vayakel, Vayitzav Moshe Vayaviru Kol B'Machaneh. Moshe made a commandment, and the voice came out, the sound came out. So this is teaching us that you have to sound it throughout the entire camp, throughout the entire people. And how many shofars are you supposed to sound? One shofar, not two or three. So there's a commandment to blast one shofar, the shofar blast of freedom. So says the Gemara, Minayin Sheba Shofar, Tamomer Vavarta Shofar. So you have to make a shofar sound. And how do we know that it needs to be a straight sound before and a straight sound afterwards? There's a Varta Shofar Trua. And how do we know
Is
that
this the first?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stanley?
Yeah, is this
You had a question?
first time? Is this the first time the shofar is blown in the Torah? I don't remember.
The shofar is also blown when Moshe goes up Mount Sinai. It says the sound of the shofar blast is blown. He goes up the shofar.
So that's the first time.
The first time that there's a ram's horn is when Moshe goes up Mount Sinai. But also, hold on 1 second, you're asking a good question. I'm just double checking. We read it last week about all the holidays, and when we read about the holidays last week, it talks about the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, and it says that you should do Shabbaton Zichron Trua. It doesn't say the word shofar, but it says a blasting. That Rosh Hashanah will be a blasting. So it's there. It's also that holiday.
Okay,
and then it says, okay. Now let's go until the word Deror, until the word freedom. What do we learn from the word freedom? It says in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah that what is Deror? Well, Rashi says that you have the ability to live wherever you want. But the Gemara Rosh Hashanah says, Ein Dror. Rashi doesn't quote this, but the Gemara, Rashi just quotes the second half of the Gemara. But the Gemara Rosh Hashanah says, what is Dror? Cheirut, freedom. And you have the ability to be free. And what does it mean to be free? That you can live wherever you want and do business wherever you want. That's the definition of freedom. So let's the Torah Tamima says that this means, because what is the definition of freedom? Because each person is not subjugate to his friend in either body or money, then each one has the ability to live and do business wherever he wants. And this is what it means. And he refers to the Talmud in Beitza 24a, that there was a bird that was called Dror. And why was it called Dror? Because it does not accept dominion over it, that it dwells in a house the same way it's in the field, that it can live wherever it wants. Meaning to say, it means freedom, and you can live wherever you want. That's what this bird, that's what it means, that you have the ability to live wherever you want. And that's the definition of freedom. So I guess the person who's the hitchhiker, who just wanders around, is then that by that definition the freest, and he can live wherever he wants. But I don't think that's exactly what it means. I think it means that the king can't force you to live in a certain place. I guess that's what Michael did for our friend Lincoln. He helped him gain freedom because he had escaped to Iraq, but he wanted to go to America, and he arranged for him to be able to live his freedom by traveling to America. That's the definition of freedom. He helped him to get to America. And what it says, there'll be freedom in the land for all its inhabitants. The Gemara in Erechim says a very important text. When the tribe of Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh were exiled, then at that, by Sancherib, the king of Assyria, he exiled the 2.5 tribes that were on the other side of the Jordan, even before Jerusalem was destroyed. From that moment on, the Jubilee year was canceled. This was around 100 years before the destruction of the first temple. From that moment on, the Jubilee year was canceled. As it says, Ukaratem deror ba'aretz l'kol yoshveh, shall declare freedom in the land for all its inhabitants. The Jubilee year applies only when all of its inhabitants are upon it. Yeah, I might think if they're on it and they're mixed together, Benjamin with Judah and Judah with Benjamin, that there will still be the Jubilee year, says the verse, for all its inhabitants. Meaning to say they have to live there properly, and not when they're mixed up. So even though right now the majority of the Jewish people are living in the land of Israel, it's still not enough to say that the Jubilee year laws should apply, because we don't know who's in which tribe, and the people are mixed up amongst all the different tribes, and so therefore the Jubilee year would not apply nowadays. We're not ready to start it up. So this is exactly what the Torah Tamima says. The Torah Tamima says it's obviously the case that nowadays there is no Jubilee year at all, because the Jewish people are scattered amongst different lands, and even the Jewish people, even a portion of them, don't live on their land. He's writing this 100 years ago. He's writing this 100 years ago. Okay. So hold on. Wendy has a question. What was the question? The definition of freedom in the Torah include being in charge of your own time. Well, it says you can do business wherever you want, and you can live wherever you want. Does that mean they have to be in charge of your time? I guess so, because it's saying you can do business however you want. That means you're in control of your own business. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I just thought when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, one of the things they were allowed to do was, I thought they were told to look at the moon or to start establishing the time of festivals. And I thought at the time you'd said being in charge of their own time was part of the definition of freedom, but I could have.
No, I did say that because that's like a definition of freedom. It's being in charge of your own time. And so this is not inconsistent with that, I don't think. It's saying that you could do business wherever you want. That means that you're in control. You have the ability to do business wherever you want. I mean, it's not exactly the same definition, but they're not inconsistent with each other. They're not inconsistent. Okay, so hold on. Let me read now, before we go, let me read what the Hasidic masters say about this mitzvah of the Jubilee, of the word freedom. see what their comment is on it. Hold on one second. Karatem deror ba'aretz l'chol yoshvah, and you shall dwell with freedom in the land for all of its inhabitants. So the Pnei Yoshua, who was the Pnei Yoshua? Pnei Yoshua he was a Rav in Lviv, in Lemberg, Lviv, Lemberg, and what happened was he was in a burning fire, and a pillar fell on him, and he was burning, and he felt like he was about to die. And at that moment, he made an oath. He said, "God, if you'll save me, then I'll devote the rest of my life to answering all the questions that Tosfos asks on Rashi." And just then he was saved, and that's why the rest of his life he dedicated to trying to answer every question that Tosfos asks on Rashi and to defend Rashi. So he says, so it says in the verse, it says, "You shall declare freedom in the land for all of its inhabitants." But it does not say for all of his servants, but only all of its inhabitants. So what's the reason? Because a country that has no freedom, even for some of the people, then all of the people who live there are considered unfree. Meaning to say, it doesn't state all those who are slaves will be freed. It says all those who live there will be freed. Because even if some of the people who live there are free and some are slaves, everybody is going to be considered enslaved. Why? Because as long as some of the people who live there are not free, then nobody there is free, because it means that the authorities could enslave some of the people. And so therefore, if there isn't freedom for everyone, then there's freedom for nobody. So that's what Pnei Yoshua says. We can recognize freedom only when there is no slavery at all in the land. What a powerful idea. Pnei Yoshua is writing this. I think he's in the 18th century. Let me just give you the exact dates. I think he's writing this in the 18th century. Hold on, let me see. Maybe a little later. Pnei Yoshua. His name is... okay, there we go. He died in 1756, and he was known as the Pnei Yoshua, Jacob Joshua Falk, and he was born in Krakow in 1680. And while youth, he became examination of the Hebrew teachers of Lemberg. In 1702, his first wife, Leah Landau, and his child, Gittel, and his mother were killed through an explosion of gunpowder that wrecked the house in which they lived. He himself was trapped in the debris of the explosion for hours. He vowed that if he got out alive, he would write a book. He was miraculously saved, and thereafter he wrote to Pnei Yoshua. He married a second wife, Tova, with whom he had 4 sons and at least 2 daughters. Yeah, they didn't have the full story that I had, which was that the vow was that he was going to write the specific book to protect Rashi, but okay, it's close enough. Continuing with what he says, that slavery, he says, is a contagious condition. That if there's slavery, not only is the slave free, but also not only is the slave enslaved, but also the master is enslaved. Meaning to say, if there's slavery in the land, nobody is free. Even the master is not free. That's why it doesn't say you should. That's why it doesn't say you shall dwell. That's why it doesn't say that there will be freedom for all the slaves, but there'll be freedom for all who live there, because nobody is free if anybody's a slave. And so that's why the Chazal say, whoever acquires a slave for themselves, it's like they're acquiring a master. Now, what he's done here is he's flipped this on this classic Talmudic phrase. He's flipped it, because normally we say, what does it mean? It means that you've acquired a master because you have to support, maintain the slave. But he's saying no, that if you've acquired a slave, you're living in a society where there's no such thing as freedom, and therefore you're not free either. So, and therefore he says, you shall declare freedom for all who live there, because the freedom of the slaves, through the freedom of the slaves, and all those who dwell in the country will be free. What a beautiful idea from the Pnei Yoshua. Everybody got that? Everybody have that idea? You follow that? What a beautiful idea. You shall, the Oznaim, what Torah says, what does it mean that there'll be freedom for all who dwell there? HaKetzad. The majority of those who dwell in the land are not slaves. So why does it say freedom for all those who live there? So he says this matter can be understood on the basis of the verse in Jeremiah. It says, "L'chein komar Hashem." Therefore, thus says God, "Lo shamatem elai l'kro deror ish l'achiv v'ish l're'eo." He says, "You did not." Therefore, God says in Jeremiah, it says, "Therefore, you did not listen to me to declare freedom, each man for his brother and each man for his friend. Therefore, I will declare freedom for you," says God. "I will call freedom for you. And I will send out pestilence and a famine, and I'll put them into the hands of their enemies and those who seek their lives." Meaning to say, when the Jewish people declare freedom for their slaves, that calls all the people who dwell there to be safe and be freer. And what Jeremiah was saying was that God says, when you free your slaves, then God will free you from your enemies. So that's the second approach. The first approach is you're not free while your slaves are free, while your slaves are enslaved. And the second approach is that only those, when you free your slaves, then God will protect you from your enemies as well. That's the second approach. And then each person will return to their lands. So what does that mean? Generally speaking, when a person is doing poorly, when he's losing his assets, then his friends and his relatives start to distance themselves from him. And all of a sudden, his old friends start forgetting about him. But when he does wealthy, when he's doing well, and he's ascending to greatness, then all of a sudden, everybody recognizes him, and they come close to him. All of a sudden, he has friends again. So that's why the verse says, "V'shavtem ish el achuzato." When you come to this place of inheritance, of success, then each person should go. Then everybody will want to be a part of your life again, and you're going to be successful. Okay, so let me just summarize what we said so far, and then I want to turn to the phrase Mount Sinai, because that's always something that I'm very, very much attached to. The first thing is, we said that you should declare freedom in the land, and what do we say freedom is? Rashi said, the Talmud says, deror means cherut, free, and that's the ability to live wherever you want and to work wherever you want. And that's what you have to declare every 50 years. And then we saw two explanations. Why does it say freedom for all its inhabitants? It should say freedom for all the slaves. Why does it say freedom for all the inhabitants? And we saw two answers to that. One is that even the person who's not free, who's not a slave, is not free as long as there are slaves in the land. That's the first explanation. And the second explanation is that if you truly free your slaves, then God will come along and protect you from the enemy. Now, the question is, the very first verse in this week's portion is, God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, and then God comes along and gives to Moses the laws of the sabbatical year. So Rashi asks the question, the classic question, what are you talking about, says Rashi? Ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. What does the sabbatical year have to do with Mount Sinai? I mean, say, isn't everything taught at Sinai? So why does it say specifically the sabbatical year? That's what Rashi quotes the Midrash as saying. We're in all the commandments. So to teach us that just like the sabbatical year was said with all its general principles and details at Sinai, so too all of the mitzvos were said with all the general rules and the specifics at Sinai. So this is the concept that Rashi includes. But we have a lot of explanations. This phrase is very very much a center of to spur Hasidic thought. So the Chasam Sofer also comments on this phrase that Rashi says. Again, what does Rashi say? What is sabbatical year? In the midst of the sabbatical year of not working your crops have to do with Mount Sinai to teach you, just like the sabbatical year was said with generalities and principles from Sinai, so too all of them were said in this manner from Sinai. So then the question becomes, asks the Chasam Sofer, why specifically is the sabbatical year the place where this was taught? The idea that everything was taught at Sinai, both in its general rule and its specifics, why is this specifically taught about the sabbatical year? Why isn't it taught by other commandments? So why is it specifically about the sabbatical year that this very important principle that everything was taught at Sinai, why is it specifically taught about the sabbatical year? Explains the Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer's answer is that the passage of the sabbatical year is what proves more than any other mitzvah that the Torah is from heaven, that the Torah is from Sinai. Because how could a person of flesh and blood promise that I will give you, if you keep the sabbatical year, I'll give you a blessing in the 6th year, and the 6th year will be good for 3 years? Because that's what God says. If you keep the sabbatical year, it'll be good for. Are you trying to say something, Wendy? Okay, I don't think so. Okay, so it'll be good for 3 years. So this is obviously a promise that only God can make, and so therefore, for this reason, that proves that this is beyond nature, and so this is miraculous. So that's the answer of the Chasam Sofer. Also, we could say that it's logical to assume that the Jubilee year, this is not from the Chasam Sofer, this one my friend told me once, only God could have written the Torah, and we see this from the Jubilee year. Because if it was a regular poor person, he would not have said you have to wait 50 years to get your homeland back. He would say maybe every 5 years. And if you were a wealthy person, he would never say it ever goes back. He said we'd keep it forever. So only a non-interested party could make this claim that you have to give the land back to the poor people, but it's at a length of time of 50 years. And so therefore that proves that there was a divine issuance that wrote the Torah and not just a man. So the base of it gives another explanation. He says, because it says that the Jewish people were exiled because they did not keep the sabbatical year and did not keep the Jubilee years, and for this reason they were exiled. So the Rashba asked the question, why were the Jewish people sent into exile? We're coming up on the holiday of Shavuot, and why were they sent into exile for not keeping the Torah? The holiday of Shavuot, we're told in Shabbos 88 that God held the mountain over their heads like a barrel, and says, if you don't accept the Torah, this will be your burial place. So if that's the case, they were forced into accepting it. So why are they punished for not doing it? So the base of it answers that the only reason why the Jewish people were given the land of Israel was on account of the Torah. And when they don't keep the Torah, they don't have any merit to the land of Israel. And so therefore, this idea that we were forced to keep the land, we're forced to keep the mitzvos, is not an excuse when it comes to the land of Israel, because the only reason why we had the land of Israel was because we kept the commandments. And so therefore, if we don't keep the mitzvah of the sabbatical year, then it shows we're not entitled to the land itself. Another explanation comes from the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes gives a mystical explanation. It's okay, you have to bear with me, it's a little bit longer, but it'll be worth it. It'll probably take us like 3 or 4 minutes to explain. It says specifically, why was the mitzvah of the sabbatical year said specifically? Hold on. It said, why does the mitzvah of the sabbatical year said specifically at Mount Sinai? Because the whole concept of not working the land, says the Sfas Emes, is what he calls bitul hateva, cancellation of our natural urges. Meaning, naturally speaking, man is hardwired to conquer as much as possible, to just keep growing and growing and growing. And the Sinai and the sabbatical year and Jubilee year is putting a break on that. We're saying we're not working the land. And so, and when do we feel this idea? When else was there a natural break on the, or a break with the natural way of the order of the world? That is when we came before Sinai. And at Sinai, we broke from the normal ways of the world and we were elevated to a direct revelation from God. And we human beings almost achieved the level of angels. And at Sinai, what were we given? Which commandment? We were given the commandment of Shabbat, which is the commandment of not working. And so the sabbatical year, that's the center of the 10 commandments, is the fourth commandment, is the mitzvah of Shabbos. And by not working on the sabbatical year for an entire year, that's telling us that we have the ability, not just one day a week, but also for an entire year, to not subjugate ourselves to the normal routine of the world, to the rat race of the world, but to actually elevate ourselves above that and to know that this whole world is really just a corridor for the world to come, for us to reset our priorities, for us to live the right way. And the life of a Jew is not when he works, but when he stops for a bit of time and rests from his work and goes against the grain of nature. And so therefore, the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year are a departure from the normal ways of the world. We need to work, but we also need to make space to step away from our work to nourish ourselves spiritually. I mean, how many sabbatical years does a person really have in their life to properly take some time? You're not going to take a sabbatical year before you're 14. Let's say you're born in the year of a sabbatical year. The first 2 you're out. And then how many years do you really have where you're really working that it would even be shaykh to say, should I take a sabbatical? Maybe 3 or 4 times in your lifetime, maybe over a 30-year period is like, or 40 years is the life of a working person. I mean, how many years is he working? So 40 years. So we have like 4 or 5 sabbatical years that you could possibly say, 4 or 5 years of your life, of your entire life. You want to say, I'm going to take a break, stop what I'm doing and spend some time on my spiritual growth. And that's what the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year would only be once in your lifetime. Once in your lifetime, you take an extended bit of study and say, I'm not going to do the regular activities I'm going to grow. And so therefore, this is why, says the Sfas Emes, this is why before you do the sabbatical year, you have to count towards it. Because through the counting, basically, you're going towards a specific place. And the 6 years follow after the, take us to the sabbatical year. That reminds us of our source and to go, that we're supposed to all go together to our source. So too from Pesach until Shavuos, we're supposed to count 7 complete weeks, meaning to say we're going from the redemption to the Sinai, that it's showing us our direction in life. So this is the concept. What the Sfas Emes is saying is, why is the Torah given at Mount Sinai? Why is it emphasizing the sabbatical year at Mount Sinai? It's to teach us this very important principle that just like the Shabbos was given at Sinai, telling us to go beyond our natural instinct, which is just to work the whole time and to take a break and not work and to just focus on spirituality. So do we have to take like was taught at Shabbos at Sinai, so do we have to take a deeper break for over larger chunks of time? And that's the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year. Finally, one more explanation of this idea. It comes from Rav Trunk of Kutna. What does he say? He says, it says, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Bar Sinai more. And in the next verse, it says, V'shavta Aretz. It says, Ki tavo Aretz asher ani nosen lachem. When you come to the land that I will give to you, V'shavta Aretz Shabbos Hashem. That the land shall rest, a Shabbos to God. And Rashi tells us, what does that mean? It means for the purpose of God. Like it says like it says that at the beginning of creation. So like it says about Shabbos, that in general Shabbos will be to remind us of God, that God created the world. And so too, the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year is for us to remember that God created the world. So that's what Rashi's saying. But this itself is questionable. Like, what's the comparison? Now, the idea that we have to rest on Shabbos to remember that God created the world, okay, that makes sense, because Shabbos is just a day of rest, so we could spend our whole day just sitting on the beach and forget that it's because of God creating the world. So it makes sense that we have to remember on Shabbos that the reason why we're keeping every Shabbos is because God created the world. But the sabbatical year, that nobody would ever think that the only reason why we're not working, actually nowadays there's a whole class of people who don't work, like these billionaires in society who don't have to work a day. But that didn't exist for much of human history. This whole class of people who didn't have to work. I mean, I guess maybe there were always wealthy people, but there's so many of them now who just don't have to work. So the question that's being raised, the sabbatical year, they were not given for us to have relaxation. They were given for us to like work harder. That we have to work harder in the 6th year, and we have to save and worry about the sabbatical year, that we're not going to have enough food. And the Chazal said, that one who keeps the Shabbos is, he's getting his reward right away. He's having the great Shabbos day. One who keeps the sabbatical year is having it hard. He's not able to work. So if that's the case, it's obviously the case that one who keeps the Shabbos has his intent for God. So what's the idea here? So he says that okay, this is okay. Now we're going to get a little bit. When he wrote this, you have to understand. Hold on, I want to just look up exactly when he lived, but there was a whole period of time when socialism and communism were becoming very popular in Russia and the lands associated with Russia and the former Soviet Union, like Lithuania and Odessa. So basically, there was a big period of time where people thought that they were arguing that the purpose of the sabbatical year was to create a socialistic society or communist society. That was the argument. You see, in the sabbatical year, everybody is the same socioeconomic status, and so therefore everybody is the same. Nobody is richer than anybody else. This is that the Torah is a socialist. That's what people wanted to argue. So that's what Rav Trunk Mikutna. Hold on, let me look up exactly when he lived, because that will be relevant. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Exactly. He lived in the 19th century, 1821 to 1893. He was the rabbi of Kutno, and he was Polish. Anyway, okay, so in the 19th century, when he argued that there are a lot of people who want to say that the purpose for these mitzvos is to make a socialistic society. And so those of small faith might say that the purpose of this is not to create a spiritually better life. But Moshe did this because he loved the Jewish people so much, and he was a socialist, and he wanted to answer socio problems. And so therefore, this is not about holiness, but this is about creating equal society, a socialistic society. And so therefore, specifically here about this mitzvah of the sabbatical year, it has to say Shabbos LaHashem. Rashi says that the whole purpose of this is not to create a perfect socialistic society, but rather to feel the presence of God. by keeping the mitzvos and emphasizing that they're from Sinai and for the purpose of God, then we're going to have this closer relationship with God and not to attach our ideological flavor of the day and say that this is what the mitzvah is supporting. By the way, the same way that the socialists adopted the mitzvah of sabbatical year and said it's about the mitzvah of the sabbatical year, the Zionists wanted to say that this is the purpose of Zionism. And this has been a very mitzvah that has been, since it's so unusual in the Jewish faith to have this mitzvah, people want to really make it as a definitional mitzvah of the Jewish people and attach their ideological lessons to it. And so therefore, what this Trunk is saying is that, no, it has to be pure to God and don't try to attach your ideology to this mitzvah. Okay, does anybody have any questions? We'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.